company for most of the day. Here's Fraud Squad.
Every year, around £52 billion is stolen from the UK's public purse. But up and down Britain, an army of fraud fighters is battling to win it back.
This money should really have been used to pay for the essential services that all of us use every day.
Benefit fraud does not pay.
What it effectively is people stealing money from you and I.
This is a huge amount of money and it's disgraceful.
From paying for the police and our health service, filling in potholes and emptying our dustbins, to making sure everyone has a roof over their head.
£2 million means an awful lot, but it was just the tip of the iceberg.
So it's absolutely disgusting what they do.
The investigators' mission has never been more vital.
Blatant lies just to claim benefits.
And the only thing I could put it down to is greed.
This is not a victimless crime. This is coming out of the public purse.
We will not let it go. We're like dogs with bones.
You will be found, you will be investigated, and ultimately you will be prosecuted.
The Fraud Squad are on the case. Today, a corrupt dentist is caught out pocketing thousands from the NHS.
Still to this day, can't understand what their motivation was, and the only thing I could put it down to is greed.
HMRC are on the trail of a criminal gang stealing millions of pounds from the public purse.
The VAT that they evaded was 4.8 million, and that just shows the scale of this fraud.
And a cunning conman goes the extra mile to line his own pockets.
It's not the government's money, it's your money, it's the taxpayers' money. Benefit fraud does not pay. In the long run, we will catch you.
Over the course of a year, around 25,000 NHS dentists deliver 26 million courses of treatment. The vast majority are honest, dedicated professionals. But unfortunately, that's not always the case. This is the story of a dodgy dentist who's stolen from the health service that we all depend on.
My name's Patrick Dacey. I'm a senior fraud investigator for the NHS Counter Fraud Authority, and my role is to investigate allegations of fraud and corruption against the health service.
Patrick's team is responsible for catching out crooked doctors and dentists from across the length and breadth of the UK. But this case of potential corruption takes place just a stone's throw from their London HQ.
The referral that came onto my desk was an anonymous call, and it just said that this particular dentist had two practices, but one of the practices was only open 2 days a week, whereas it was advertised as being open for 5 days a week.
This might seem innocent enough, but could the conflicting opening hours be covering up something more sinister? With no more information to go on, Patrick needs to do a checkup of his own.
The dentist had NHS contracts at 2 practices. Once we started looking through the data, it was clear that one of the practices was being run correctly, but when we started looking at the records in London, that was when it was clear that there was a problem here.
Patrick is immediately suspicious of the amount of public money the London practice is claiming back from the NHS. So he and his team decide to do some digging.
We decided to send some questionnaires out to a series of patients for whom we thought the claims looked a bit questionable, asking them if they had received treatment during the period that had been claimed for them, and if they had, what treatment had they received. Out of the 150 that we sent out initially, we had 36 people responded to that. Only 4 said that they'd actually received the treatment that had been claimed for them.
This damning data confirms Patrick's suspicion that the dentist is definitely up to no good. While honest dentists up and down the country are struggling to keep on top of their waiting lists, she's invented treatments and claimed money for work she hasn't carried out.
To build the case that she's brazenly banking thousands of pounds of NHS money, more questionnaires are sent out across the capital. And once again, only a fraction of their patients actually had the treatment that the dentist is claiming for.
This showed there was clearly something wrong at that practice, and we needed to get in there and look at their records themselves.
With a pattern emerging, Patrick's convinced the dentist's own files hold the key to discovering the extent of the fraud.
I came to the practice here with colleagues from the Counter Fraud Authority, and we served a Health Act notice on the dentist at the practice here. And the Health Act notice essentially requires them to produce to us whatever records we're asking from them. And the records we wanted them to produce was basically all the patient records that they held here.
During the raid, Patrick and his team sees so much paperwork, it fills the back of a small van. And then he begins the painstaking process of drilling down into each and every document.
Within the record cards in general, there was an awful lot of dates that had been overwritten or crossed out. There seemed to be annotations in pencil, and also where we suspected additional claims had been made, the entries were made in a different pen, so it seemed to be they were done at a different time.
These are all telltale signs that the dentist is indeed cooking the books, all in a bid to claim additional NHS money.
This is a scanned image of the record card itself, and as you can see there are two post-it notes attached to the front of the record card. So these are notes that the dentist has put on the record card about what to then write in later onto the record card for the false claim.
The sticky notes are the smoking gun that Patrick needs. Solid proof that the dentist is reminding herself to go back and alter the records at a later date. In total, the investigation team examined thousands of documents, and what they discover is staggering.
We found within 3 financial years a total of 378 claims, which we could say were completely false.
The dodgy dentist stole over £70,000 from the NHS. It's enough money to pay 2 nurses' salaries for an entire year. As a result of all his hard work, Patrick is armed to the teeth. He's got over 10,000 pages of evidence and crucial witness statements from patients who never received the treatment that the dentist was claiming for.
So about 5 or 6 of them said that they'd never had a night guard in their life, for example. Another witness was working in Saudi Arabia at the time. Another one was at a hospital on the same date as the claim had been put in, receiving chemotherapy treatment.
It's all the evidence Patrick needs to take the case to court, where the deceitful dentist pleads guilty to fraud against the NHS.
The judge sentenced the dentist to a 20-month custodial sentence, but suspended for 18 months. She was also ordered to do 250 hours of unpaid work, and of course she was required to repay the money in full.
With a further £13,000 added to account for inflation, Patrick has recovered almost £90,000 of much-needed NHS funding.
It's taxpayers' money, so it is galling when you see determined and deliberate attempts to take money away from the front line from patient care. And it was strange to see this successful dentist committing fraud in this way. Still to this day, can't understand what their motivation was, and the only thing I could put it down to is greed.
There are some simple steps all of us can take to help prevent this kind of fraud. When you visit the dentist, you'll be issued with a treatment plan like this. Now, you should make sure that it's been filled out correctly and never sign a blank form. If you're paying privately, there shouldn't also be an NHS cost. And if you think there's something dodgy going on at your doctor's or your dentist's surgery, you can report it via the NHS Counter Fraud website or the Anonymous Fraud Hotline. From roads to schools, hospitals to pensions, the public services we all rely on are funded by taxes. Everyone needs to pay their fair share. But some people will go to extreme lengths to dodge their taxes, pocketing the cash and leaving the public purse short of the money it desperately needs. This is the shocking case of a criminal gang who stop at nothing to avoid paying millions in taxes in order to fund a luxurious lifestyle.
I could see it was an organised crime. It was sophisticated, it was planned. This case is a fraud of dishonest and relentless evasion of tax.
Tracy Noon is a senior investigator for HMRC. She spent the last 30 years fighting against tax evasion by serious organised criminal groups.
Tax is important because it is a way of funding public services. Most individuals, most businesses do pay their taxes, so it's really not fair if we let these other people that are not paying their taxes get away with it.
And Tracy's just been handed a case that's going to test her skills to the limit.
So this case started from a routine compliance visit by HMRC officers who visited a retail outlet in Manchester. Part of HMRC's role is to visit traders and do what we call compliance visits. And that's just basically doing routine visits that checks the books and the balances, and that's part of their everyday duty.
While HMRC officers are inspecting the Manchester off licence, they notice something doesn't quite add up with some of the alcohol purchases.
On one particular invoice that was from a company called Car Cash and Carry, they looked at the VAT number, and when they did checks, just sort of routine checks on the VAT number, it actually came out to a company called South Coast Wholesale Limited. So when they did further checks on South Coast Wholesale Limited, they noticed that Car Cash and Carry was actually a trading name for that company.
Trading under a different company name isn't unusual, but they decide to take a closer look into South Coast Wholesale Limited to make sure it's all above board. And they soon come across some alcohol purchases that stick out like a sore thumb. They discover the wholesaler has been buying and selling large amounts of alcohol, all paid for in cash by the same 5 companies.
So the HMRC officers decided to look into these companies in a bit more detail. And they noticed some similarities between these unconnected companies. They noticed that the VAT registrations had the wrong national insurance number on them. And when they did checks on the national insurance number, those national insurance numbers actually came out to members of the public rather than anybody that was connected to the company.
The more digging they do, the more suspicions keep growing. HMRC also spot the trading addresses are not business premises, but residential, so decide to pay one of the businesses a visit. But when they get there, they're in for a big surprise.
One of the so-called directors of one of these companies actually turned out to be a podiatrist. She wasn't involved in alcohol at all. She'd never been a director of a company, and she didn't know any of the names that were put to her that were part of this so-called enterprise. So that gave us fantastic evidence because it proved that this company was fictitious and wasn't real.
It soon unravels that all 5 companies are made up. The named directors of these businesses are all innocent members of the public, completely unaware their identities have been hijacked and their addresses used to register the companies. Shocked at what they found, the team quickly step up their investigation. South Coast Wholesale, who've been buying and selling large amounts of alcohol to these fake companies, are their prime suspects behind the false businesses. But they need more evidence. The closer they look, the more irregularities crop up.
They noticed things like the spelling of Prosecco was actually spelt wrong on all of the 5 companies and all the same invoices. And again, that seems like such a coincidence that if the companies are not connected, why would they make the same spelling mistake?
And that's not the only coincidence. They start to look at the 5 companies' VAT returns, and it's not long before they make a crucial discovery.
They noticed that the same IP address had been used for the 5 unconnected companies. So in other words, the same location had been used to submit VAT returns that actually shouldn't even be connected.
And guess what? The location of the computer where the VAT returns were submitted is none other than the premises of South Coast Wholesale Limited. When they look at the VAT returns of these 5 fake companies, they discover that in total they've dodged a staggering £4.8 million in VAT. That's nearly £5 million that could be going towards essential services the public desperately need. The team can clearly see South Coast Wholesale are majorly fiddling the system. A criminal investigation is launched. And Tracy heads up a team of investigators who are building a case. But so far haven't got any of the names behind the fake companies. As they dig through their accounts, the team has a breakthrough.
A woman calling herself Emily Parker was phoning the HMRC VAT helpline, and she was phoning this helpline in connection to all these 5 companies, and she was claiming to be the company secretary of these companies. But when the officers did some checks with Company House, there was nobody named Emily Parker that was a company secretary for those companies.
Things are not adding up. Emily Parker doesn't seem to be on the books for South Coast Wholesale either. So who is this mystery woman? And how does she fit into this web of fraud?
I felt the most important thing to do at that stage was to identify who is Emily Parker. And I felt her identity was pivotal to really finding out what this case was about. So the first thing the case officers did was they analysed the phone calls that had been made to the HMRC VAT helpline, and they identified a common number. That mobile phone number belonged to a woman called Claire Hill.
Claire Hill is using Emily Parker as an alias. Tracy and her team's focus now shifts to finding her, and quick. Later, as the team catch up with the fraudsters, they uncover more than they bargained for.
One of the pieces of evidence actually turned out to be the jewel in the crown.
In the UK, almost a third of over 14 million people with disabilities work for a living. But for many, paid employment just isn't an option, making disability benefits an essential lifeline. Sadly, there are unscrupulous scammers looking to make a fast buck by cheating the system.
Every overpayment of benefit, obviously, is a case of that money could be used better elsewhere, whether it be benefits, hospitals, schools, any other thing that the government funds.
Adrian Brewer is a benefit fraud investigator. He's spent almost all of his working life chasing down criminals, intent on dishonestly taking money from essential frontline services.
I've been working on fraud now for the last 40 years. It's a wonderful job. I love what I do. I work with a great team of people, and we save an awful lot of money each year pursuing those people who are falsely claiming benefits.
This case begins with an anonymous tip-off about a man receiving disability benefits who might not be as unwell as he makes out. The suspect's now living in southwest England, but the story starts 250 miles away.
The initial allegations came in whilst the gentleman was living in Milton Keynes. So the officers conducted their initial inquiries up there. Basically, the gentleman concerned claimed that he could not walk more than 50 metres using the appropriate aids such as crutches or a stick or even a wheelchair. He also claimed that he was unable to lift his arms up, dress himself properly, wash himself, bathe himself, or even to use the toilet on a normal basis. All of which contributed to a high level of disability benefit being awarded following his claim form.
As well as receiving regular disability payments, he's also getting yet another huge benefit, paid for by the taxpayer.
It was discovered that he had a Motability car. All he would need to pay for would be the fuel that was actually used in it. Servicing, road tax, insurance, etc. is all paid.
The Motability scheme allows other people to use the car to help with his day-to-day living. But investigators discover the man's niece looks to be using the car solely for her own use. The cheeky claimant isn't without a set of wheels of his own, though.
The evidence that suggested that his niece had been using it as opposed to himself was the fact that he had purchased a separate vehicle for his own use and insured that vehicle whilst in Milton Keynes.
Suspicions are growing. Investigators in Milton Keynes are ready to take their case to the next stage, when suddenly the suspect disappears off their radar. They're worried that he might have slipped the net. But it's not long before he resurfaces 250 miles away on Adrian's Patch in southwest England.
When he moved from Milton Keynes, the fraud investigation case is automatically transferred to the local investigators in the area. So the case was passed to us, and we basically took over directing the investigation.
Adrian's now on the case. It's down to him to find out whether or not the suspect's entitled to the cash he's claiming. He knows surveillance is the only way to get the evidence he needs, but the decision to keep tabs on someone is never taken lightly.
If we, as a department, want to do surveillance on somebody, it can sometimes involve up to 6 officers on one particular case for a period of time of up to 3 or 4 weeks. So the cost mounts up considerably.
Adrian needs proof the claimant is walking away with taxpayers' money. But if he's wrong, thousands of pounds will be wasted. Later, as the investigation ramps up, so does the fraudster's brazenness.
Not to our surprise, he came in with 2 arm crutches and basically displaying extreme distress and uncomfort.
HMRC Senior Investigator Tracy Noon is in the middle of a major criminal investigation into a multi-million-pound fraud involving dodgy alcohol sales. Her team have uncovered a huge network of fake businesses and false paperwork, which all points towards organised criminals avoiding enormous amounts of VAT.
The VAT that they evaded was 4.8 million. And that just shows the scale of this fraud.
That's £4.8 million stolen from public services that are crying out for help. The investigation has identified a suspect named Claire Hill, who, using the alias Emily Parker, is pretending to be the secretary of the fictitious companies. They need to track her down. And after some background checks, finally come up trumps. Tracy sends out officers to arrest Hill.
So the criminal investigation officers knocked on the door of Claire Hill, and she came to the door. She was then arrested and her house was searched. And during that search, we found so much evidence. We found evidence connected to all 5 companies, including VAT registration documents, passwords, usernames that she needed in order to phone HMRC.
The team also searched for evidence of the name Emily Parker, the alias she's been using when calling HMRC about the fake businesses.
The other interesting document that was found was a cover story handwritten on a fax outlining the persona of Emily Parker.
Her cover story has been blown, and the case against her is overwhelming. But the team knows she's not working alone. The focus of the investigation shifts to the director of the company, South Coast Wholesale, that's been used to buy and sell the alcohol, Amir Shafiq.
The fax was actually sent to Amir Shafiq, which demonstrated to us that he knew about the fraud because he also was getting the same instructions.
HMRC investigators are sent out to arrest Shafiq. The fax is a key piece of evidence for Tracy and her team. It links all the key players in this major fraud.
There's an actual message that tells Claire Hill and others, you do not know Majid. It's a clear instruction that you do not know Majid.
But the team do want to know exactly who Majid is, and they soon discover he's Claire Hill's boyfriend.
So now he's definitely on our radar, and we need to find out more about him.
While the team do some digging on Majid, back at the station, both Claire Hill and Amir Shafiq are keeping tight-lipped. They're released while the team continue to build a case against them, analysing the mountains of paperwork and seized phones.
Claire Hill's phone actually turned out to be the jewel in the crown because she had kept so many text messages. It was quite clear that she was receiving and giving instructions about the fraud. So she was telling other members of the gang what they needed to do, how they needed to do it. Those text messages proved to be such valuable evidence.
The messages also implicate the man whose name the fraudsters were supposed to keep secret, Chaz Majid.
It became very apparent that Chaz Majid was the kingpin behind it all. And although he tried really hard to distance himself from any of the paperwork, any of the companies, the evidence in the end stood out to say that he was the main person behind this fraud.
It's a huge breakthrough, but Tracy's investigation is far from over. As the team continue to analyse the seized phones and dodgy paperwork, they're in for a big shock.
What it also uncovered was Majid, Claire Hill and Shafiq's involvement in the smuggling of alcohol from the continent into the UK.
The team knew booze was involved, but have now discovered the gang are running a multi-million-pound alcohol smuggling operation, all via South Coast Wholesale. Tracy and her team finally know how the whole operation works.
The VAT fraud was actually created in order to legitimise the supply of that alcohol. This alcohol is illegal. It's been smuggled into the UK, but it has to go onto the shelves in order to sell it. So to make it look legitimate, they create a supply chain And that's where they use these 5 companies and to create the various layers so that by the time it gets to South Coast Wholesale, it looks legitimate. And South Coast Wholesale sell it to the UK market.
This cunning group of criminals are creating false VAT returns submitted by fake companies, all to hide a huge amount of illicit alcohol being smuggled into the country.
So the reason why they create the various companies is because if they didn't, they would be liable for the excise duty on the goods that have been imported from the near continent. So they create a smokescreen. They try and disguise the point that the tax is liable, and that's why they create a supply chain, which makes it harder for us in HMRC to follow and identify the point at which that tax becomes liable.
The excise duty dodged comes to an incredible £11.9 million. The team have all the evidence they need to prove how they're carrying out this devious scam.
And if we look at these text messages, Claire Hill is sending a message to Chaz Majid asking, "Green last night?" And Chaz responds, "Yes, 3. And this relates to the traffic light system that they had. So if the lorries got through the port and were not stopped, the text messages would show that it was green, and that meant that others involved in this criminality could take control of the loads and unload them, and then they would be pushed onto the market. If the loads got stopped, then a red traffic light would be sent, a signal saying it's red, don't touch it, because it will be going to a bonded warehouse and the duty will have to be paid on it.
The kingpin Majid is using public money to shamelessly fund an extravagant lifestyle of flash cars and million-pound homes, selfishly withholding the money desperately needed by the public services we all rely on. Tracy's seen enough. She has all the evidence she needs against Majid. They track him down and arrest him.
Chaz Majid was interviewed under caution, but he had an answer for everything, and he denied that he had anything to do with the fraud whatsoever.
But despite having an answer for everything, he can't talk his way out of the mountain of evidence against him and his accomplices. The gang, led by Majid, have shamelessly fiddled the system out of an astonishing £16 million.
We are talking about £16 million that could have gone into the public purse. All the evidence was put together by the criminal investigation officers, and they submitted a file to the Crown Prosecution Service, who charged these 3 individuals with evading excise duty and VAT fraud.
But the 3 fraudsters, Majid, Hill and Shafiq, still deny everything. So the case goes to trial. And to the team's surprise, it seems at least one of the gang is seeing sense.
At the trial, Amir Shafiq pleaded guilty at the start of it. The trial then carried on for 10 further weeks, of which Claire Hill and Chaz Majid maintained their innocence. At the end of the trial, the jury deliberated and found both Claire Hill and Chaz Majid guilty. Amir Shafiq received 5.5 years prison sentence, Claire Hill 7 years, and Chaz Majid 10 years.
Along with 8 other gang members also involved in the fraud, the gang were given sentences totaling 34 years. It's a major triumph for Tracy and her team. Majid, Hill and Shafiq and the rest of their gang will finally pay for their crimes.
Prison sentences are really important, but the most important thing is to get the money back that's been stolen from the public purse.
Amir Shafiq is ordered to repay £737,000, money that will go back into vital services that really need it. The team is still waiting for a decision on how much Chaz Majid will have to pay back. And after one of the most complex cases of her career, Tracy's proved even the biggest fish eventually get caught.
So it is really, really important that people pay their taxes, and the majority of people do. But there are some that don't. And it's those people that we really want to investigate and we want to bring to justice. And nobody is beyond our reach.
In the southwest, investigator Adrian Brewer is on the tail of a suspected benefit cheat who's been stealing money from the public purse for years. But time is about to run out for this crooked conman.
The gentleman concerned claimed that he had the following disabilities, in so much as he had trapped sciatic nerves, which affected both his legs and his right arm. He had damaged discs in his back, which affected his movement.
So far, Adrian hasn't enough solid evidence to prove if the man is lying or not. He knows there is only one thing for it.
It was clear that surveillance would be the only option in this particular case, and it was granted for a period of time.
What the undercover investigators catch on camera could be the difference between a conviction and the suspect continuing to make crooked claims. Adrian is about to find out if the surveillance has paid off, or it's just been an expensive waste of time.
The gentleman concerned was followed to a local shopping retail park and went into a supermarket, and was seen walking around the supermarket with a trolley. The gentleman was taking items from the top shelf despite being unable to raise his arms above shoulder level. The items concerned were quite heavy, and given the disabilities that he had claimed that affected how he could do things, he would have had extreme difficulty in lifting any of those items.
This is exactly what Adrian needs to prove the suspect's been lying about the level of his disabilities. And in doing so, he's pocketed £15,000 in benefits. But the revelations don't end there. And even Adrian, with his 4 decades in the job, can't quite believe what he sees next.
This involved one of his fortnightly appointments, where he had come into the job centre using and showing extreme suffering or distress. Then he left the job centre swinging between the crutches, basically not putting any weight onto his legs at all, and then putting the crutches into the car, getting into the car and driving off.
He may be putting on a convincing show in front of the authorities, but little does the man know, Adrian's team is watching his every move.
He was then followed a further 10 minutes down the road, and he parked up on a place where there was a load of rough ground by some trees, and got out of the car and then proceeded to walk his dogs around this piece of rough ground. No crutches, no sticks, no signs of any discomfort being shown.
The footage Adrian's already seen is damning enough, but this takes things to a whole new level.
The ground was clearly rough. There had been vehicles over it, there were tracks, there were ruts. Not the sort of place you would expect someone who was worried about falling or has experienced falls in the past to be walking, especially having 10 minutes earlier been on his crutches.
Adrian and his team have seen enough. The hassle-free trip to the supermarket, the shameless charade at the job centre, Now this, a carefree wander around the woods with his dogs.
So clearly, at that stage, the surveillance team was satisfied that they had sufficient evidence for myself and my colleagues to interview the man to talk about the legitimacy of his benefit claim. Not to our surprise, he came in as he had come into the job centre previously with 2 arm crutches and basically displaying extreme distress and uncomfort.
Determined to keep the act up, the conman plays it cool, insisting the details on his claim form are correct and he's entitled to every penny of the benefits he's getting. But Adrian knows the cameras don't lie.
The more we questioned him, he seemed to get more agitated and eventually decided to say to us, "So you are saying that I am lying on my claim form?" To which we replied that the video evidence would seem to suggest that may be the case.
Incredibly, even after seeing the video footage for himself, he still refuses to admit he's done anything wrong. So the case goes to court. Adrian has to hope his evidence will be enough to convince a jury.
The trial lasted for 3 days, and on the 3rd day, around about lunchtime, the jury went out to make their decision and returned 12 minutes later with a verdict of guilty.
The decision is one of the quickest Adrian's ever seen. The suspect's been caught red-handed, and now it's time for him to face the music.
The gentleman was sentenced to 6 months imprisonment, suspended for 2 years.
After months of hard work, the game's up for the crooked claimant. And Adrian and his counter-fraud colleagues have sent out another message for any potential fraudsters.
It's not the government's money, it's your money, it's the taxpayers' money. The government literally only gets money from the taxpayer to fund benefits. Benefit fraud does not pay. In the long run, we will catch you, and if we catch you, we will take you to court and we will prosecute you.
Join us again when our investigators weed out even more shameless fraudsters.
Seeing somebody steal that amount of money makes me angry.
And help protect the public purse.
It's a clear message to other people that might be thinking of doing the same thing. All money has got to be paid back to the public purse.
If you do commit crime, we will be coming after you.
A different kind of porridge if you want it this morning. Jailed, do time inside Macabry Prison on BBC iPlayer. Or stay with us next on One. The criminals are on the outside and keeping our insurers on their toes. Claimed and Shamed is next.